News Sunday.
Good afternoon and welcome to TVD 11 News Sunday. The issue of animal experimentation. Who is right, who's wrong? Some say tests on animals have to be done in order to save human lives. Others say the experiments are unnecessary and that they're downright wrong. Is there any middle ground? Well, that is what we will try to discover today. And here to discuss those questions are Dr. Tom Giduz, who is a doctor of psychiatry at North Carolina Memorial Hospital and a member of the North Carolina Network for Animals. Also here, Nancy Rich, who is a professor of English at NC State University. She is president of the North Carolina Network for Animals. Also here, Dr. Stephen Vogel, professor of pathology and the chairman of Duke University's Institutional Animal Care Use Committee. And finally, Dr. J. Malin Kootsey from the Departments of Psychology and Computer Science at Duke University. Dr. Kootsey is also director of National Biomedical Simulation Research. Let's look first at a few facts and figures pertinent to what we're about to discuss. Each year, we have learned 17 million to 22 million animals are used in experiments. Most of them are mice and rats. Almost 2 million more, though, are guinea pigs, rabbits, hamsters, monkeys, cats, and dogs. The Animal Welfare Act was instituted in 1966 and designed to protect animals that are used in medical research. That act was reaffirmed just last year. It regulates the feeding and care of lab animals except rodents, and it requires committees of veterinarians and community officials to ensure that those lab animals are humanely treated. What we're going to discuss today is, we're going to start rather with some basics, I think. Let's find out first how it is that animal experimentation has helped people, has helped modern science, modern medicine, and then we'll discuss how it is that animal rights activists feel it has hurt. Dr. Vogel, may we start with you regarding how far we've come because of animals?
As a pathologist, of course, this being the discipline where one has the opportunity to see disease as it occurs both in humans and animals, through the years I've had the pleasure of seeing many diseases eradicated by medical knowledge. One calls to mind polio, for example, which required the susceptibility of the monkey to define that the virus gains entry into the central nervous system through the bloodstream. And this opened the door for vaccination. And then the use of animal tissues, again, the monkey kidney, to grow viruses in sufficient concentration to generate a vaccine. And the same can be duplicated, I think, in areas of cancer and many other medical fields. So I think we are deeply obligated to lower animals as a source of information, which to this present time has contributed immeasurably to our current knowledge of medicine and the care of patients.
Nancy Rich, you are president of the State Network for Animals. Clearly there have been some advances thanks to experimentation in lab work with animals. What is it, though, that your network, your group, is opposed to about experimenting on animals?
Well, several things have been mentioned here just in the last minute or so. One is the Animal Welfare Act, which I believe you alluded to, as protecting animals, laboratory animals, and seeing that they are humanely treated. I think that my organization is much concerned with letting the public know that the Animal Welfare Act does not protect animals behind the laboratory door at all. That only assures that they are fed and well cared for outside the laboratory door. That's one. Now, as far as what Dr. Vogler said about the many, many wonderful cures for disease that have been brought about through animal experimentation, he mentioned polio, and I am not a physician, I'm not a researcher, but I have some idea that that was brought about many, many years ago, several decades ago, and this suggests that perhaps the number of diseases being found, cures being found for diseases is not so prolific as one might think.
So you seem to be implying then that we've come far enough thanks to animals in the laboratory.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that many people associate animal experimentation with cures and miracle cures, like for cancer, for instance, as he mentioned. And they don't realize that cancer experiments on animals have been going on for over 100 years, and how many lives of animals must be sacrificed before perhaps we turn to a different direction for a cure.
I see. Let's have Dr. Giduz then pick up on that point, as well as being a doctor of psychiatry at the State Hospital in Chapel Hill. You are also a member of the North Carolina Network for Animals. Were we not using animals, what might be an alternative? Or where do we go from here if indeed too many animals' lives have been lost? What do we do?
Well, I think medicine started off on the right foot back in the 1800s with Koch's postulates on how diseases were transmitted. And for that, he had to use animal models. And I think it applied very well to bacterial diseases, and great strides were made, of course, in medicine to curing bacterial diseases. But the animal model has now been applied to things other than bacterial diseases, to which it doesn't apply at all. It's been applied, has limited applications in cancer, I think, and has almost no application in some of the, certainly some of the psychological studies that are done and drug studies that are done on animals are very far off base. Some of the alternatives that we have are clinical studies. Certainly some of the greatest strides have been made in cancer, cancer prevention and cancer cure have come from clinical observations and not at all from animal research.
All right. Apparently there have been strides enough made that computer simulation is apparently now also a very big part of that sort of research. Dr. Kootsey, I believe that is certainly your area of expertise. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Using computers to simulate biological processes really depends on how much we know about a given biological process. In other words, we cannot, with a computer, generate information about a living system artificially. We take information that is already known and use the computer as a thinking tool to try to understand that information. Understanding, I think, often means understanding the behavior of a complex system in terms of its more fundamental parts or its more fundamental mechanisms. People in the physical sciences, such as physics, chemistry, and engineering, are used to doing this. When they build something new, they test it first using the fundamental laws that they know. They usually use mathematics to do that. And what we're trying to accomplish is to make tools available to the biologists to do the same thing for the living systems. That is, to use the laws of physics and chemistry along with mathematics and computers.
But in a nutshell, it can't be done for now.
It does not. It can be done in a limited way for certain parts of animals and animal systems. Not certainly for the entire animal, but for certain cell functions and behaviors and certain organ functions and behaviors. It's very successful in some limited areas, but certainly not for an animal as a whole.
I see. So we've come a long way, but not far enough yet to completely abandon the use of animals in experiments. We will continue to discuss this with animal rights activists and people in the field of medicine who know all about the issues. We'll be right back with more of TVD 11 News Sunday. Stay with us.
Everybody's running on the power of love in America's Love Run, benefiting the Muscular Dystrophy Association. You don't have to be an athlete. Just set a reasonable goal, then ask friends to pledge a donation for each mile you run during a 30-day period. Run anywhere you like, at any time. It's that easy, and you could win a valuable prize. Call 848-8714 to find out how you can sign up for America's Love Run. You can go a long way on the power of love.
They will never make the headlines. Their names will never be enshrined in the record books. But here, on this field, they will know accomplishment. Perhaps for the very first time, these special athletes will know pride.
Special Olympics builds champions in your community. I'm Andy Park asking for your support. Call the North Carolina Special Olympics. The number is 1-800-843-NCSO. Right, gang?
Right.
We're talking about animal experimentation for the purposes of the advancement of medicine and so forth. We are talking to people on both sides of the questions. Nancy Rich, we mentioned a moment ago, is president of the North Carolina Network for Animals. Tell us, let's review again quickly, what would you have ultimately be the case in lab experimentation? Would you like to see animals completely removed from the process?
Well, one of the things we're working very hard for is to stop duplication of experiments. I have here a letter from a congressman, a senator from New Jersey, who tells us that of the $4 billion spent in taxpayer money each year on animal experiments, at least 1/2 of those experiments have been done before. So we are very much...
That is unnecessary.
Beg your pardon?
You see these things as unnecessary to continue?
Yes, duplication should be cut out immediately. Particularly, and in addition, we're hoping to push and hope that alternatives, that scientists themselves, and many of them are becoming more interested in alternatives to animal research. And that's something we're hoping for. Ultimately, we think that together scientists and humanists will work out these problems, and we will get the animals out of the laboratories.
But are they not treated well, Dr. Vogel? And you are involved with a committee that sees to it that they are.
I'm sure there are exceptions to any broad statement of that sort, but I think in general, animals, and certainly in the current era, people who study, scientists who study biology and who study living tissues and living cells are by their nature very sensitive to the living animal from which that tissue is derived. In the current time, the NIH, in order to safeguard against transgressions of the animal right, has established a law that went into effect the 1st of January 1986, where all medical centers are required to have a review committee. It's very comparable to what was set up about 15 years ago to review the use or the utilization of human subjects in research spheres, so that currently there is a committee in all medical centers, as there is in institutions here, that reviews a grant application, all grants that have animals to be used, survey the use of the animal, the species of the animal, the number of animals, the need for the information that is being sought. The laboratories are inspected by this committee. A form has to go into the National Institute of Health before any funding is given out for research. And this committee is composed it's structured by definition with veterinarians, with people who are in the field of science, with people who are in the university outside of the field of science and the arts, in the law department, for example, in our own committee. And so that the NIH has also defined that they will do unannounced site visits at all medical centers that use animals. And the intent of this is to, there was some reference to giving the concept that there is a closed door. I don't believe that is an accurate description of the environment in which medical research is conducted. I think it's a very open community in which scientists review other scientific work and take objection if animals are abused.
Well, we are hearing then that a lot of safeguards are obviously built into the system. Are they not enough, in fact?
Well, no, I don't think so, and I think this is evidenced by the some of the research projects that have come out of the local area. There's one done at University of North Carolina, and the title of the study is, "Does pinching the tails of rats influence whether they eat dog food or rat food?" And I think a lot of research generates itself in order to just provide more money for the institution. Follow up on something else Dr. Vogel said, and that is that scientists are caring and sensitive people. And I think they certainly start out that way. But my great fear is that somewhere along the way during medical school, that sensitivity is lost. Pleased to say that at Chapel Hill, the medical school tries very hard to create sensitivity in the medical students in the first and second year with some of their instructional work. In the third year, I think that's lost, and lost in particularly in a laboratory exercise which is totally unnecessary, and that's one known as the dog lab. And these are used in many medical schools in the country to teach advanced cardiac life support. There are alternatives for every maneuver that are performed on these former pets. And as a matter of fact, in England, dogs haven't been used in medical education since the 1880s. There's no evidence whatsoever that English doctors don't perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation as well as American doctors do. In addition, many medical schools in the United States don't require the dog lab, but schools such as University of North Carolina and Chapel Hill still do, and I think it's a shame.
Well, is there any truth to that? Could medical researchers be implementing some alternatives already?
Yes, I think there is, of course, movement in that direction, and it is in response to the need to be humane to animals and not use them when it's not necessary. In Canada, for example, what was referred to is the national law. You cannot use animals to learn techniques, purely surgical techniques. In this country, it is still the rule that animals can be used. It's very likely that in this country, instead of dogs, where there is greater level of sensitivity, that perhaps pigs will be used in the near future.
But aren't people going to have a great outcry about pigs?
But I think, again, we're dealing with a human, or with a living animal, and the alternative really is to learn procedures from patient exposure. And the basic question is whether it is more appropriate to learn that in an animal environment or using animals or in the context of a patient. I would disagree that medical students are insensitive. I think, at least my experience with medical students, and I do teach in Carolina, is that they are very sensitive people.
Even by the third year?
By the third year, yes.
What do you say then to people, Nancy Rich and Dr. Giduz, who might say you or your children couldn't have been vaccinated were it not for experiments, lab experiments?
Well,
that in fact you've benefited from those advances.
Well, of course we have all benefited from our history and what's happened in the past. But we also have suffered from our mistakes in the past, and I see no reason, now that we have become aware of the ethical and moral responsibilities that we have for other species, that we should continue to use these as our own lost pets, for goodness sakes, are being used. Right here in Durham, the Pound sells lost pets from the Pound to Duke University to be experimented on.
There are those who'd say, though, that that's a savings in tax dollars for you.
Well, it's somebody's pet. You said, you know, that's somebody's pet. And because we've made the mistakes in the past when it benefited, who's to say we wouldn't have benefited if they hadn't used animals? They might have found these answers some other way, it seems to me. But we're coming into a new ethical view of the world, and I think that all the other disciplines need to be considered also. We have history, we have sociology, we have English, we have literature, of course, and a great number of American writers are telling us, in fact, even our own patriotic songs, America the Beautiful says, and crown thy good with brotherhood. Well, brotherhood is sensitivity, sensibility. And our writers are saying in the evolutionary process, the next step is sensitivity. And I think the animal rights movement is a beginning thing, and that historically we will look They will look back at us and say, this is a beginning, a new
It's a
beginning.
matter of changing attitudes.
Yes, I think so.
No
Raising
time like the
consciousness.
present to start.
And this is the purpose of the Network for Animals, to let the public know what the issues are, to simply, here it is. This is what's happening.
All right.
Think about it.
Some concluding remarks in just a moment. Stay with us for more of TVD 11 News Sunday.
That's me, James Worthy, making my moves to put the North Carolina Tar Heels into the NCAA championship in 1982. Hey, that's me again. Only this time, I'm a champ with the 1985 Los Angeles Lakers. If there's one team that wins year in and year out, it's the Boy Scouts. So if you want to be a winner, be a Boy Scout. You might say it's a worthy experience.
Our rivers and lakes don't have to run red with mud. Whether it comes from eroding subdivisions or gully cropland, sediment is a major pollutant of our rivers and lakes. It also destroys fish habitat and increases the likelihood of flooding. Your local Soil and Water Conservation Office can help farmers and developers design and install soil conservation practices that will protect our rivers and lakes. Many area farmers can qualify for special cost share funds as well. To learn more about the programs and services available to you, contact your local Soil and Water Conservation Office.
We're discussing the use of animals in medical research today, and with just a few moments left, we want to talk about how there is an effort underway, or we want to emphasize the fact that there is a common ground that animal rights activists and researchers feel they can reach, and we want to talk a little bit about how much of a timetable we have here to get to that point. Dr. J. Malin Kootsey is Director of National Biomedical Simulation Research and can tell us more about how that simulation research is used to actually teach med students what they learn now in using animals in the laboratory.
Well, one of the goals of the dog lab, as has been referred to here already, is to teach the medical students the complexities and the behavior of the regulation of blood pressure and about flow and the generation of that pressure in the heart and the many complex aspects of circulation. Many of those ideas can now be taught through computer programs. I'm not speaking of the surgery, for example, because that's a little difficult to teach, but the concepts of the circulation itself, how it works, how it can be modified by drugs and various other conditions. Many of those concepts can, in fact, today be taught through computer programs. That is, the students can do the same kinds of experiments on the computer programs as they would in the laboratory, observe the results. And there are some side benefits from this, too, in addition to eliminating the use of real animals. It's often less expensive. The student can concentrate on the actual ideas themselves rather than getting involved in the instrumentation, the surgery, and the other things. The lab is there to teach the physiology of the cardiovascular system or whatever system is being studied. And we feel that that's most appropriate to be taught through a computer program, and that can be done today. It's a little expensive now, and the programs for doing that are still somewhat crude, but they're being improved.
Since it is such a new field of endeavor, though, might we be sacrificing something that used to be provided by hands-on experimentation in the lab?
There is certainly missing at the present time the handling of the very animal itself and the surgical procedures that might be learned. So I would not minimize that. However, the main purpose of those laboratories was to teach physiology. And I think we need to concentrate on that first through the computer programs and find other ways to teach the surgical procedures and the sensitivity toward animals and the other things that can be learned through that.
All right. So what animal rights activists want to see then is a complete switch to this system. And is there a timetable that's any more feasible than as soon as possible or any more firm than that?
Well, there's certainly a national movement through the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is a group of thousands of doctors based out of Washington, D.C., to totally phase out the dog lab from medical schools because it is felt to be unnecessary. And there are also movements by medical students in Chapel Hill to get the curriculum there changed as well. Chapel Hill already has many alternatives that are used in some way but aren't effectively used and teaching the same skills that students now learn on the animals.
What about the use of rodents? I noticed that the Animal Protection Act puts them in a different category. How do you feel about rodents?
We respect all life. That is our underlying fundamental assumption, that all life deserves respect.
So we're talking about a complete pull-out then.
Absolutely.
How do you feel, Dr. Vogel, about the sacrifice, if there might be any, involved in going computer in the labs?
Well, I think certainly we need to move. I'm not fixed on the idea that animals are the only way to learn. I think certainly one should not paint a black and white picture. We physicians and scientists respect all life, but I think we put gradations on certain values. For example, I don't let termites eat my home, or potato bugs eat my potatoes. And yet, as I go up the phylogenetic scale, I appreciate that there's a higher level of life expression in cats and rabbits and dogs and so forth, and monkeys, as you reach the human. I think there is need to appreciate that living matter is to be respected all through that scale, but that there is a gradation in which man has benefited tremendously from life below, and we need to honor that, but I think we need to keep it in a proper perspective.
All right. Well, our thanks to all of you. We have just a matter of seconds left, but thank you both for shedding light for us on both sides of the question. Nancy Rich, Dr. Stephen Vogel, Dr. J. Malin Kootsey, and Dr. Tom Giduz. Thank you all for being with us today. That's it for this edition of TVD 11 News Sunday. We hope we've been able to clarify some things for you as well. Thank you for joining us today. Make it a good Sunday.